Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Once again, Pakistan's politics is in turmoil, and once again, the cause is Imran Khan. But this time, he's not just challenging the civilian government headed by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. He's also challenging the army chief, the ISI, and very possibly the army as an institution itself. Joining me from Lahore to explain what's happening in his country is the highly regarded editor of the Friday Times and the former caretaker chief minister of Pakistan's Punjab province, Najam Sethi. Najam Sethi, before I come to details, let me start by asking if you agree that Imran Khan's long march is a challenge both to the civilian government headed by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, but perhaps more importantly, it's a challenge to Army Chief General Bajwa and the army's authority as the deep establishment which ultimately determines whatever happens in Pakistan.
Thank you, Karan. Yes, on the face of it, yes, it's a challenge to the government and to the establishment headed by General Bajwa, but actually it's a challenge to the establishment and General Bajwa. Imran Khan has said on countless occasions that he's not ready to talk to the government in power. He thinks they're crooks, they're illegitimate, and so on and so forth. That's why he's walked out of parliament. He says basically he wants to pressurize the establishment to put a gun to the head of the government and tell them to go home and order fresh elections. And General Bajwa and the establishment have now said that they're not going to be taking sides, and they're going to stay neutral or apolitical, as they put it now, and that this is between Imran and the government. Imran should go back to parliament as an opposition, sit with them, and determine how to move forward. Imran's view is this, that the establishment should support him and should not be neutral. He thinks neutrality is for animals. And he thinks that because he's the most popular man in the country, because he's good, and the opposite, and the government in power and the other parties are evil, the establishment should side with good and not with evil. So he wants an establishment intervention, which is on his side, rather than a neutral or apolitical establishment that says we're going to stay within our constitutional bounds.
Najam Sethi, let's first talk about the challenge to the Sharif government. After that, I'll come to what is clearly the bigger challenge to the army chief, to the ISI. How do you explain the enormous crowds that Imran Khan has attracted first at his rallies and now on this long march? Is it the appeal of his anti-American message depicting the present government as imported puppets? Is it the tough economic conditions that the country faces, and in particular soaring inflation? Or is it Imran Khan's personality and popularity?
Karan, it's a lot of all these factors put together at one time. One is more important than the other. But the historical record shows that the establishment of the army has historically portrayed the Sharifs and the Zardaris as crooks. That's something ingrained into the army high command and the rank and file. And they've been flogging that narrative for many years. And a new generation of Pakistanis has grown up that knows very little about history and is actually now looking for alternatives to the two dynasties that have been ruling this country for like 30, 40 years. So Imran Khan comes along the scene. The establishment decides to pick him up, prop him up, and make him a cultish figure. And Imran delivers in the sense that the younger generation empathizes with him, sees him as different from the others. And then Imran's populist message, which has several dimensions, resonates with the younger generation. He uses religious symbols. Pakistan is extremely religious in many ways now, much more so than when I was growing up. He uses anti-Americanism. Pakistan used to be very pro-American during my time. And now there is an anti-American sentiment in this country that has again been cultivated by the establishment over the years, since it started to disagree with the Americans and so on. So there is a narrative out there which is that Zardari and the Sharifs are dynastic and crooks. Away with them, number one. Number two, Imran is clean. Number three, Imran will get the best people on board, which is the middle class, the landlords, and the business elites have ruled this country. It's time now for the middle class to come forward. So the professionals and the technocrats are all lined up behind Imran Khan. They see this as their great opportunity to make a mark on Pakistani politics, most of it urban. And then finally, the anti-American narrative does sell. I mean, it sells in most countries, and it sells in Pakistan. And so it's a combination of all these things. And unfortunately, the opposition, or now the government, which is the Zardaris and Nawaz Sharifs, they've done very little to change their own narratives and their own faces and their own personalities and their own economic policies. So they offer really nothing new to the new generation. The old world of Pakistan still stands with them in Sindh and in Punjab. But at the end of the day, now nearly 50% of Pakistan's population is under the age of 35. 30% of more are between the age of 25 and 35. So you can imagine they're looking to Imran Khan. They're not looking to the oldies because they're no longer goldies.
Now, when the Long March reaches Islamabad on the 4th, will Imran Khan be allowed to hold a rally in the capital? And is there a fear that he may transform the rally into a sit-in protest? I believe that's what he did in 2014. And I'm told that that protest lasted for over 120 days. Is there a danger that if he does get to the capital and hold a rally, he may do the same thing again?
Well, first of all, the first rally that you're referring to, or the Dharna, where he hung around for over 100 days, didn't really amount to anything. In the end, he had to call it off. Because at the end of the day, the government is not threatened by people sitting in a park and making merry or dancing or protesting and saying the same things over and over again. It doesn't impact the government of the day. Yes, it may leads to inconvenience. Some roads are blocked and so on and so forth, but the government can carry on, which is what the government of that time did. Which is why at the end of the day, when Imran had to call off his dharna, the establishment has had to use the judiciary to get rid of Nawaz Sharif. And even then, they couldn't get rid of his government because the government lasted the full five years. So Imran Khan sitting in a park doing nothing and thundering away the same things that he said for the last X number of years is not going to lead to a fall in this government. At the end of the day, the fear is that if this march takes place as scheduled and arrives in Islamabad and then spills over, something happens and everything becomes violent and there is anarchy, the danger then is that two things could happen. The first is that the establishment could go to the government in power and say, look, you're going to ask us to come in and stop this. We're not going to fire on our own people. Better that you negotiate with Imran and find a solution to this. If the government balks, says, well, what kind of solution does he want? He wants to appoint the next army chief. We're not going to let him do that. It's our constitutional right. And he wants an early election. Well, we can talk about it, but if he wants an election 3 months from now, we're not going to give him that because we'll then have to go home now. And the caretakers will have to come in. And, you made a commitment with us. When we came in, you said we could stay the whole year because we carried out the IMF program at your behest. We could have gone home at that time, not taken the reins of power. Imran was extremely unpopular. We were very popular. If we'd held elections at that time, we would have had a sweeping victory. But you said, no, we can't afford to have elections at this time. We need the IMF on board. We're facing financial bankruptcy. So you ordered us to carry out these difficult tasks, which you've done, which have made us unpopular. And now you expect us to go home and be wiped out by Imran, who's now rising in popularity, precisely because we are becoming unpopular, precisely because we've carried out those hard tasks, increased prices, inflation, and all the rest of it. This is not on. So we're going to stick to our guns and we're going to sitting here. So now then that will lead to another situation. Either they will succumb and they will sit with Imran Khan and do a deal whereby the elections are not held next year in November, October as scheduled, and maybe held maybe in May, June, which is what Imran wants. Or if they continue to not get out or not hide the writing on the wall, then the army could step in some unconstitutional manner and sweep everybody aside, which is something they've done all these years. They know how to do it, and at the end of the day, they also know how to get a particular degree of legitimacy under the law of necessity from the appliant judiciary. So then various combinations can come into play. This you could there could be a 3 month takeover. There could be a 6 month takeover, which is sanctioned by the judiciary. So we really don't want to go there. Those are all the options that are open. So the next 20 days are very critical because the army chief is retiring on the 29th. And Imran wants all this to happen before then. Because if this month goes by and the government doesn't concede what he wants, appoints its own army chief, then they're set because the new army chief is not going to take Imran's side. He may not take the side of the government, but he's certainly not going to take Imran's side. He's going to withdraw into the shadows even more than the current dispensation. He will not want the army to be blamed for anything. And then the government will feel strong. So Imran's real bet is that something gives this month.
There's a paradox, however, isn't there, in the position Imran Khan finds himself in. He's bringing the masses out onto the streets in the belief that this show of popular support can force early elections. But paradoxically, the larger the support he brings onto the streets, perhaps the government will be more determined to delay elections because that support will suggest to the government that they will lose and Imran will win. And therefore, the stronger Imran's popular support, the more reluctant the government will be to concede early elections.
The government is not going to concede early elections until a gun is put to their head. Because the government knows that if there's an early election, they'll be wiped out. Because they're very unpopular right now because of the IMF measures. So regardless of how popular he is or how popular he's not, the writing is on the wall. He is right now quite popular. I mean, the recent by-elections all suggest that he is a strong candidate. And if elections were held today, he'd get a majority. There's no two ways about it. But why would they want to have an election now? They want the rest of the 8-9 months to try and fix the economy, to reclaim their lost legitimacy. And perhaps when they do announce elections, they'll give a relief package to the people so that the people forget the miseries of the last 8-9 months and focus on what is given to them at that time. So there's a level playing field. Then there is the question of Nawaz Sharif. How can you have an election where Nawaz Sharif, the leader of the most popular party, is not allowed to contest because of a rigged disqualification process that took place. And again, a rigging that is taking place now to stop Imran Khan from being disqualified. So either Imran should be disqualified or Nawaz Sharif's disqualification has to be withdrawn, which means that time is needed for that. Right now, the courts are looking into this possibility because the realization has dawned on everyone, including the judges, that the way Nawaz Sharif was disqualified was unfair. So the likelihood is that in the next 3 to 6 months, Nawaz's disqualification will be overturned by the courts. A level playing field will be created. Imran will not be disqualified. Nawaz's disqualification will be reverted. And then there will be a free and fair election where the two leaders are able to contest freely. Right now, Nawaz is in exile, can't come back. He will be put into prison as it is. So there are all these other issues as well. So in order to have a free and fair election, you need a level playing field. A level playing field means this government stays in power for a bit, sorts out the financial issues facing this country, which were thrust on them by the establishment. They could have said, "We are sorry, we are not going to do it. Get somebody else to do it. Why should we be blamed for all this?" But they didn't. They keep saying we did it for the sake of the national interest. And there's no doubt about that. The establishment said to them, hang in there, carry out these measures. We can't waste 3 months. We'll be in a state of default. So they did what was asked of them. So, you're facing these issues. I don't see an early election the way the sort of early election that Imran wants, short of an army intervention that somehow compels it to happen. But if that happens, an army might stay on for more than they say that they are coming in for, which is the past record. Or if they do go ahead and comply with what Imran wants, then there's no doubt about it. Imran will win.
In fact, I just point out to an Indian audience that when General Zia overthrew Bhutto in 1977, he said initially he was only going to do it for 2-3 months, hold elections and go back to the barracks, and stayed, I believe, for 10 or 11 years. Let's at this point, Najam Sethi, come to the second challenge, the far bigger challenge that Imran Khan and his process and his long march posed to the army. Now, To the outside world, it literally looks as if Imran has thrown the gauntlet down to the army. Is the army worried by the challenge he seems to be posing them? Because it looks as if it's perhaps one of the most serious challenges the army has faced since Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in the 60s and 70s.
Yes, this is a very serious challenge for two reasons. Number one, Imran's popularity is based as much on anti establishment rhetoric as it is on an anti American rhetoric, number one, and an opposition, anti Sharif Zardari rhetoric. The second problem is that there's a great deal of support in the rank and file for Imran. Don't forget this. This is the same generation that we're talking about that is out in the streets. It's the same generation that is now wearing uniforms and is the constitutes the rank and file of this army. So therefore, the army high command is concerned that there is discontent or despair within its own rank and file. So they don't want to do anything to hurt Imran because that would hurt the sentiments of their own base. But at the same time, they don't want to do something that brings Imran back to power at enormous cost because they've just witnessed that cost, where Imran has turned the tables on them and destroyed Pakistan's relations with the rest of the world without being able to turn the economy around or do anything positive. So it's a very negative agenda that Imran flaunts. So that is their concern. And they also now realize that it was a mistake to set up this hybrid regime, try and eliminate the other politicians, bring Imran in thinking that he would be a good puppet. At the end of the day, he's his own man. But here's the problem, and I think this is the sort of problem some of us grapple with. In the old days, the anti-establishment rhetoric was flogged by intellectuals, liberals, human rights activists, and urban, liberal, constitutional-minded, democratic people. The current situation is that this rhetoric now is in the hands of Imran Khan, who is far from being a Democrat of any sort, far from being a liberal of any sort. In fact, his argument is that the army should be my police force. The army cannot have an independent role as a state organ. It should belong to me. It's the classic fascist formula. Nawaz Sharif tried to do something like this in the late 90s when he became an Amir al-Momineen, above parliament, and wanted to rule like a dictator, a democratically elected dictator when he had a two-thirds majority. Imran seeks the same thing. So what he's asking for now is unconstitutional. So some of us are concerned because this is not the sort of independent democratic dispensation we are looking for. This is, in fact, quite the contrary. And so here we have a situation where where Imran wants to bypass the constitutional constraints and limitations imposed on politicians, the armed forces, and the judiciary. He wants to turn all of them into his own organs, and he then wants to rule as a dictator.
There are two things in that answer that I want to pick up on very quickly. First of all, you're clearly suggesting that the army internally, vis-a-vis Imran Khan, is divided. The younger captains, majors, colonels seem to be supportive of him. The generals are pretty certain they don't want him back. How much of a problem is this internal division in the army?
It was a problem. It's less of a problem now. They have clamped down on dissent within the army and in the retired army people. There was a lot of support for Imran from within the lower ranks of the army. The senior ranks don't express their sentiments because they're in for promotions and all the rest of it. So a lot of this discontent remains at the bottom level. And the discipline is pretty strong. It's ironclad. So beyond a point, it doesn't spill over into any rebellion or revolt or anything like that. But, the people outside, retired army officers, same batches have been supporting Imran Khan. And they've had to be the stick has had to be wielded to shut them up because social media being such a powerful voice, they were exercising a powerful influence on the current serving officers and rank and file. So they have now put a stop to that. But there's no doubt about this, that the top leadership of the army, which has tasted Imran Khan's 4 years in power, and the current attack on the army as an institution, which has gone beyond attacking, say, one or two people in the army, which might have been acceptable. He's really, and as Indian commentators continue to point out, that Imran has damaged the army in 1 year far more than all India's fifth generation warfare has been able to do in 70 years. So that is quite an interesting way of putting it. And a lot of people in the army, in the senior army, think that that's exactly right with what Imran is doing, and therefore it's not acceptable.
There's something else that was also inherent in your earlier answer. Is there an emerging anti-army sentiment amongst the young of Pakistan? I believe at a recent Asma Jahangir Foundation conference in the Avari Hotel in Lahore, anti-army slogans were heard.
Well, that's what I was talking about. Now, that is a conference which is largely attended by and addressed by liberals, Democrats, constitutionalists. And so you can imagine the sentiment there, which is the old historical sentiment, which is the anti establishment sentiment, because the army's been interfering in politics and creating all sorts of messes. So you could have expected that to happen. You had nationalists from the periphery, you had liberals, you had human rights people, all of them. So they're part of an old, shall we say, group or grouping in this country that has constantly opposed army rule and has stood for democratic institutions. So that was not surprising. What is surprising is that the people on the street right now, who were never part of that narrative, have suddenly jumped in and become part of that narrative and gone far beyond what the liberals and the intellectuals and the Democrats and the constitutionalists have done. And they have now become pretty vocal. So what is happening now is that there is a contradiction within the ruling elites, as it were, about what role the army should be playing. And at the one level, this is a welcome development for intellectuals and constitutionalists, because it obviously pushes the army back into the shadows. But at another level, where Imran wants to take it is to turn the army into a police force for himself, which of course means that this is another way of bringing the army back into politics, but at the behest of an authoritarian ruler. So this creates this dilemma for many people, some of whom are now supporting Imran Khan and some of whom are continuing to stand on the other spectrum, where they think that this is far more dangerous than the earlier situation, where at least there was a balance of power between the civilians and assorted civilians and the institutions of the judiciary and the armed forces. But now the judiciary and the armed forces are going to be lining up behind one party rule. And here's a man who says, I want to wipe out all these guys. I don't want an opposition. I don't want the Zardaris and Sharifs. And the institutions of the judiciary and the army must back me fully. I am the good. They are the evil.
Now, against this background, and I think this background is particularly important and it will be eye-opening for an audience in India, against this background, on Thursday, the ISI Chief Lieutenant General Naveem Anjum held an unprecedented press conference and claimed at that press conference that Imran Khan, in the last days of his prime ministership, had asked the army chief for, and I think I'm quoting now, illegal and unconstitutional favors, although General Anjum did not specify what those favors were. And it was then said at that press conference that in return, Imran Khan had offered a lifetime extension to General Bajwa. Is this allegation true, or is it actually an attempt to blacken Imran Khan's name?
No, this is not an attempt to blacken his name. By the way, all attempts to blacken his name will fail if, as far as his own support base is concerned. He's Mr. Teflon. Nothing sticks to him because the hatred for the other sides is so overwhelming that his supporters are not prepared to accept anything about Imran Khan if it means moving away from him. So, but here's the issue. This is the point I'm making. Imran's view was that General Bajwa, you should not be neutral. Allow me, support me. And if it's a question of your extension, it's no big deal. If they have promised you an extension, like another couple of years or whatever, that's not a big deal. I already gave you an extension. I'll give you another extension. So it was an attempt to bribe the general to stay the course of supporting him, when the general and his close colleagues had decided that sticking close to him had led to a complete discrediting of the army in at least half of Pakistan, which was not with Imran Khan, and that this was hurting them, especially in their home province of Punjab, which belonged to Nawaz Sharif. It still has a big vote bank in Punjab. It's diminishing because Imran is encroaching on it now, but until now, Nawaz has been the ruler of Punjab and has a big support base there. And 70% of the army comes from Punjab. So, so they wanted to now move away from Imran, acknowledging that their hybrid experiment had failed and Imran had turned into a Frankenstein's monster. And Imran's view was, look, you got to stick with me. There's no way that you are going to move away from me. And if General Bajwa, all it takes is a promise of an extension, no big deal. I gave it to you first, I give it to you again. So that's what the DGISI was saying, that, he's tried to bribe us, but we have decided we want to be apolitical now. Now, for how long and all the rest of it is unsaid. But for the time being, they don't want to take sides.
But
They want this political process to work itself out, and let the chips fall where they may. So if they're not, so that was what he was trying to say, that Imran has been selling a false narrative. The narrative was false on America. That America triggered a regime change here. That was false because they were part of it, and the cipher and so on. And this had total lies. And he was quite blunt in his words. Similarly, this business of I'm above compromise and negotiation, I'm good and everybody else is evil, bullshit. The fact of the matter is that he tried to bribe us, and look at the way he's trying to bribe us. And we have decided there will be no more extensions, and we've decided that we want to stay out of it. So I think this was an attempt, I think a last ditch attempt, because they had not given their point of view, and he'd been hammering away at them with a false narrative. And so they thought that, okay, the time has come for us to now lay down the red lines.
But the amazing thing, Najam Sethi, is not just that the ISI chief held an unprecedented press conference and revealed their side of the story in public for the first time, something that the ISI chief has never done before. But the other amazing thing is Imran's response. Rather than cower or get intimidated or even keep quiet, he threatened the ISI chief the very next day. He claimed that he knows things which could embarrass the ISI and the army if he reveals them. I think his exact words, and I believe they were reported by Reuters, were the following: DGISI, listen carefully. The things I know, I am staying silent for army institutions and the country. I don't want to damage my country. But he added, I can say more. However, I will not say it, as I do not want to hurt the institution. Now, that is quite a threat being given by Imran Khan. How have the ISI chief and the army chief responded to this clear threat?
I think they've shrugged their shoulders and said, no problem. You want to say something, go ahead and say it. But the net impact of the DGISI's press talk has been Imran has actually stepped back. Imran's speeches have, in the last 3 days, have been pretty mild compared to the sort of things he was saying earlier. He's now, the rhetoric is now not naming names. He's now alluding to various things. I think one reason for that is that, contrary to what you think or what you're seeing, the crowds have not been as thick as one imagined they would be. And I think, the long march has been postponed time and again. And even now he's saying it's going to take 7 or 8 or 10 days to get to Islamabad. And now there are all sorts of concerns that whether or not he'll be able to put together a big show or not. And secondly, whether there'll be violence. Now the issue has gone beyond all that. Now the issue is there's evidence now that armed supporters of Imran Khan from the KP province will make their way to Islamabad. And there are reports of credible reports and statements of provincial ministers from Imran's KP government in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, saying that, bring your licensed weapons along, and then make openly threats that if there is an attempt to stop our long march, then we will resort to, we will defend ourselves with our weapons. So, it's getting to that stage. So the ball is in many ways, partly it's in the court of the establishment, partly it's in the court of the government, what sort of resistance it puts up, but it's also in the court of the Supreme Court, because the Imran is applied to the Supreme Court to overrule the government's objections to him bringing people into Islamabad. There's a section 144, I'm sure it exists in your part of the world as well, where more than 5 people can't get together because it might create a law and order situation. And there's a lot of evidence that there will be a law and order situation. In fact, Imran Khan has said that if you stop us, there will be bloodshed. And people from Imran Khan's party are saying the same thing. So there's a threat of bloodshed. And so the Supreme Court is now sitting on all these petitions. There's Imran Khan saying, allow us to go there. The government is saying we will not allow them to go there. The Supreme Court is biding its time, looking to see which way the wind is blowing, what the establishment thinks, or what is likely to happen. Because don't forget, if the Supreme Court allows this thing to happen, and then there's violence, then there will be a lot of criticism of the court that, we all said that there would be this, and yet you allowed them to go there. So there's going to be a lot of give and take in the next 10 days, which is why I've just written about this and saying that the next 10, 15 days are very critical for what happens next in this country, whether Imran Khan backs off, whether there's a compromise, and whether and when who will be the next army chief and when the next elections will be held. My sense is some of these issues will be resolved by the end of November.
Going back briefly to that threat that Imran Khan delivered on Friday, when he said that I can reveal things that would embarrass the army and the ISI, do you have any sense of what he's hinting at?
No, not really, because I mean, what is it that can he can turn around and say that, Bajwa was doing this and ISI was doing this and they told me to do this, which is what he's been saying. He's been saying, I wasn't running this government. I was told how to run it. I was told who to take. I was told what decisions to take. It's only when I started resisting what they were telling me to do that I created a problem with them. Their argument is that we've been, changing his nappies. This guy's been a disaster. Everything we've had to do, we told him to get on with the job of government and provide some good governance and repair our relations with our neighbors and with the international community, and he made them worse. And we're in a far more difficult situation now than ever before. So, there's this narrative that's coming and going on from both sides. And so, Imran could talk a little bit about that.
Now, we're coming to the end of this interview, but before I end, I want to ask you two more questions. As you said yourself, the Army Chief General Bajwa retires, I believe it is on the 29th of this month, in literally 4 weeks' time. In normal circumstances in Pakistan, choosing a new army chief is a critical decision. But in the present circumstances, how much more important and crucial has it become?
It's very crucial. Look, there's a month to go. One argument is that the government should announce the new army chief now, so that this whole issue of who will be the next army chief and what will this chief do and what will the next guy do is settled. But, for that to happen, the routine procedure is that GHQ sends a list of 5 senior generals or 5 generals, amongst whom the Prime Minister is entitled to select one. That's the routine. The appointment is the Prime Minister's. The thing is that GHQ hasn't sent such a list so far. Now, whether or not there is an understanding between the current chief and the current Prime Minister that at what stage should you send this list, or whether this is just the GHQ hanging on, or General Bajwa hanging on to his powers until the last moment, just in case something needs to be done, which might entail some new decisions, we don't know. But the fact of the matter is that General Bajwa has said that I will retire. He said time and again, I will retire. But here's my problem. What if there is violence in 10 days' time? What if the government of the day says, call in the Rangers? The police cannot stop these people. And the Rangers are either denied by the army, in which case we have a constitutional problem. The government can't survive. Or if the Rangers are provided under the relevant sections of the law, which is the constitutional position, the government can call the army in and paramilitary forces in aid of civil power. Then what happens? Will the Rangers be asked to stop this long march, and if necessary to use force to stop them? And what happens if there are dead bodies in the event? So we are faced with all sorts of difficult questions, and because if that happens, then the likelihood is that the army might say, okay, what the hell, I mean, these guys are taking casualties on both sides. We might as well step in and pry them apart, put everybody into prison, and find a way out of this dilemma in the next 3 to 6 months. So, we really don't know.
What you're really suggesting, but you're doing it very artfully and deftly, is that there is a possibility, and it may not be such a remote possibility, that events may so develop that the army steps in and takes over. You hinted at it earlier when you talked about a 3-month or a 6-month takeover. You're suggesting now that General Bajwa, who hasn't sent the 5-man list to the Prime Minister, may be deliberately doing so to bide his time and see what happens. There are signs and straws in the wind that suggest there could be an army takeover depending upon how things develop.
Well, I'm not sure. My argument is army intervention. I'm not saying army takeover. Army takeover would create all sorts of issues with constitution and.
What is an army intervention? Can I ask, what do you mean army intervention?
Yeah, army intervention is that if it comes to that stage, General Bajwa takes his walking stick and he goes up to the Prime Minister's house and says, "Sir, my people are telling me that this is difficult to control. We are not ready to shoot on our people. I urge you in the next 24 or 48 hours to sit and find a solution to this. Don't compel us to do something that we don't want to do. which will create problems for you and for everybody else. So that would be an army intervention, which has happened in the past. When you come to a situation where a direct army intervention, a violation of the constitution is on the cards, the army has gone to the sitting prime ministers and said, find solutions or else. And in the past, solutions have been found. And so, therefore, that is what Imran wants. Imran wants to bring this whole pot to a boiling point where General Bajwa goes to the Prime Minister's house and says, Prime Minister, I'm afraid, don't ask us to control the situation. We are not going to do it because it would lead to a backlash against us. We're not going to fire on our own people. You guys sit down with Imran Khan and do this. He wants an early election, give him an early election. Sit down. We'll facilitate this dialogue behind the scenes. But get on with it now, because every day is going to create a difficulty.
But this is very interesting, and I'm going to have to ask you for a short answer because we could be running out of time on Zoom. But it seems there are two possible prospects facing the Sharif government. If things develop wrongly when Imran reaches the capital on the 4th or a couple of days later, the army chief may well, as you said, take his walking stick, go to the PM's house and say, we're not going to fire on our own people. You've got to negotiate, and push him into doing so. In other words, he will be then pushing the prime minister into virtually committing political harakiri. On the other hand, the other alternative is if the prime minister does manage to convince the Imran Khan to back off, then even if he's failed to force elections this time, Imran will continue to keep trying. And that means for the next 10 months, until Pakistan eventually goes to the polls in August, September, October next year, political turbulence will continue. So it's either harakiri for the government or continued political turbulence over the next 10-month period.
Okay, here's what history tells us. A similar situation arose in 2014 when Imran did his dharna, the one that you referred to, which lasted for over a year, for many months, 120 days or so. At that stage, the army sent a message to Nawaz Sharif. General Raheel Sharif was in charge. I am privy to this information. And he sent a message to Nawaz Sharif to say that you should resign. That's the only way out of this situation. Appoint somebody else as prime minister and then order fresh elections. And Nawaz Sharif turned around to the messenger and said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to resign. You want to do something? Take over. We'll deal with it. But I'm not going anywhere. The message was returned back to the sender. The sender thought about it and realized that the bluff had been called and backed off and eventually retired. Nawaz Sharif saw Imran Khan off, used the police to good effect to thwart his long march, and beat the protesters blue and black. And that was the end of the long march and everything else. And Nawaz Sharif continued to rule. So, that's one option. The second option, of course, is the one that you refer to. If this government is forced to concede an early election, which is to say in 3 months' time, Imran will win, hands down. Now, the problems for the government of the day, which will then be the opposition, will not be anything compared to the problems that the army high command will face when Imran Khan comes back into power with a vengeance.
Which is
why
the army high command doesn't want an Imran return with the majority either. But very quickly, because we have only 30 seconds, if what happened in 2014 with Nawaz Sharif plays out again, and the government does survive, there are no early elections, right? Then I presume the turbulence that Imran is creating will continue to happen for the next 10 months.
Not necessarily. No? Not necessarily. The counter argument is that Imran is at its most popular right now. The crowds are thinning, they're tiring, fatigue is setting in. One of the reasons why Imran wants to strike now. And if Imran has to carry on agitating like this for the next 8 or 9 months, giving the government time to stabilize the economy and to perhaps give some good news to the people, Imran would be a loser in the long run. So his agitation at its height, if it can't overthrow the government, is not going to amount to anything else later on.
Najam Sethi, thank you very much for this insight into the politics of your country, and in particular for explaining how an army intervention, if it happens, would work and what it would amount to, and also for opening the eyes of an Indian audience to the internal differences, maybe not divisions within the army, over support for Imran Khan. These are things that I think an Indian audience doesn't know, but has learned for the first time from you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.